Are the fans happy? We will dive into that and much more on the Blazer Focus podcast. I'm Aaron Fentress, along with Joe Freeman, who, as you know, covered the Blazers for a long, long time before mischievously allowing me to take over the beat so that I could deal with these types of messes. And I know he's been gleefully at home. You can see he's been sitting at home going, Fentress, my revenge for whatever in the past. But anyway, moving along. Wow, what a crazy 3 weeks. We had the Stotts dismissal, mutual parting, whatever. We had the controversy over Chauncey Billups being named by Lillard. Then we had the process. Becky Hammond was in there. Were they going to hire a woman? Were they not? Were they going to go with Mike D'Antoni? Were they going to maintain hiring Billups, who has this 1997 allegation hanging over his head for participating in a rape a long time ago as a rookie in Boston? And in the end, Lillard was pissed off because he was being dragged in to the whole vitriol surrounding Billups and blamed in some ways. And he reportedly was saying he wants out, or not wants out, but he might want out because of some of the controversy. It was just a head-spinning 3 weeks, but it all came to an end sort of on Tuesday with the introduction of Billups. So let's just dive right into the press conference itself, Joe. I was there. You were home chilling with your kids, you lucky dog. It was an interesting press conference, to say the least. I know there's a lot of controversy surrounding it because of some questions that went unanswered. Also, it was really short. It ended in 30 minutes. I had 24 questions. I had a bunch of basketball questions I was going to get to. I never got to. And here's another thing, too. I'll just preface this for some of the people watching so they understand. Usually in press conferences, you get a mic, you hold it, you ask the question, and then you can immediately ask a follow because there's usually going to be a follow. Well, the way they did it, they brought the mic to you. You weren't allowed to touch it because of COVID protocols. And then as soon as you asked your initial question, they pulled the mic away. So you couldn't ask a follow-up. So then you had to sit there and wait for it to come back around to you. And I got 2 questions in, and then shortly after that, it was done. We all know, most people saw that they shot down a question asked by Jason Quick of Chauncey Billups to elaborate on how the allegations sort of shaped his life from that point on. So as someone who I know watched it at home, what were your, and who has covered 1,000 times more press conferences than I have, especially given the fact this was my first live in-person press conference with them, because this was their first one in 15 months since the COVID-19 pandemic started in March of 2020. So what did you make of the entire situation?
Well, it was a disaster. It would have been hard for it to go any worse. It was a master class in how not to handle PR. It was too short. Look, if you're going to be coming out under controversy to tout a coach that you're presumably very excited about hiring, someone that you think is going to be the face of the franchise moving forward, that is going to help pacify your all-star and turn this franchise into a deep playoff team, you need to let it ride more. You need to get out there. You need to let him speak. You need to let the questions be asked, no matter what the questions are, so that everybody can move past it. If you've done, and I know we'll get into some of this later, but the Blazers say that they did a thorough independent investigation, which I believe they did. I don't think Neil, despite saying it's proprietary and trust me and all that, despite all that, I believe that they really did do their due diligence and they believe in the findings. Well, let that stand for itself. Let him speak. Let everybody ask their questions. The wildest part about what happened with them cutting off Jason and all that is that the Blazers were right there. They were this close to moving past the controversy, to having a positive momentum, pushing forward moment. Chauncey opened his mouth. He was prepared to answer the question when the signal or the cutoff or whatever it was happened. But the worst part is that he could have explained himself. He could have added context and nuance and perspective. He could have humanized himself, but instead he was interrupted, and now he was cut off. That's all that anyone is talking about. And so that issue still hangs overhead. No one has been able to kind of move forward from that. And instead of talking about, hey, this guy's going to help the Blazers in XYZ, and he's going to help Damian Lillard with ABC, now we're still talking about this. And, I don't think either of us want to or intend to make light of the allegations or the situation. but we're here to talk about basketball, and we can't talk about basketball because of how poorly this was handled yesterday.
Right. And, I went into this thing prepared for a situation where,
prepared for battle,
not
contention,
battle, but like the elephant in the room had to be addressed. Right. And there were some people out there who were like, people better ask tough questions. And some of the tough questions that people wanted asked were like almost trying to litigate the case. That was not going to happen. None of us are in position to litigate the case. Chauncey Billups would be an idiot to sit there and litigate the case. He has maintained his innocence. That's it from his level. He's not going to sit there and argue about, time, what happened at this time and that time, who said what. Like, that's just ridiculous. And I think some people wanted that. So I was going in though with a list. I had a list of 24 questions. I had them sectioned off. The case, his career, basketball, Neil's version of why they're hiring him, like Lillard. It's just all sectioned off. So when they came out and they at least addressed it themselves and said, we've done our own homework on him, we think his story checks out, and we believe that nothing happened with him that was consent or non-consensual, then that sort of erased a lot of my questions that I couldn't necessarily go to because they had addressed it. So then, though, what you're hoping is, okay, so we're still now we need to get, like you said, the humanizing of Chauncey Billups, presenting him as a person and not in what's in a lot of people's minds as an accused rapist, right? And so he did a good job in his initial statement of talking about how that whole incident shaped him. And, was talking about, he was with his future wife, Piper was his girlfriend at the time. And it shaped him in terms of who he hangs out with, where he goes, what kind of things, et cetera, et cetera. I thought that was very good. But then Jason asked an extremely innocent, legitimate, Jason Quick, follow-up question, which
open-ended, like, please explain more.
Yes.
Add yes.
Right. And it wasn't, now say, had it been a contentious situation and one of us came back, well, but according to the police report, you said, like, then I could see where they'd be like, drink water, send signals, shut it down, right? That would make sense. But this was, like you said, a chance for Billups to talk more about him as a person, as a man, as a father, who he is, to offer more evidence for those who have doubts that maybe either A, he didn't do it, or B, if there was some involvement, he's a completely changed human being, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which wouldn't pacify a lot of people, but still it's something. And they just shut it down. They shut that part down. And I looked at Jason like, what the hell? So then I started looking at my questions. I'm like, which ones of my questions am I going to get
like,
shut down as well?
Off,
like what?
Cross off.
It was just, it was a bizarre flex in that situation. Now, to me, the best thing to do, if you really just want to say, okay, because we're not going to talk about anything related to 97 anymore, is to say that and say, can all questions from here on out at least be basketball related? They didn't do that. Jason's question got shot down and went back around a few more questions. And then they're like, we're going to wrap it up. Now, I looked at my watch. I'm like, wrap it up? Like, what are you talking about? So yeah, they started out looking like they might finish the day with a B+ and ended the day barely passing. I don't think it was an F because there was some good moments, but it could have been a lot better.
Yeah, again, you've got everything. The table's been set for you to air everything out there, discuss the elephant in the room, allow him to express himself in whatever manner he wants. You state that we have done our due diligence. We've done an independent investigation. We've talked to all his former employers. Everything is set for you to do that, to address it, to move on. But you can't get out of your own way. And now here we are still talking about it. It was almost like a golden opportunity squandered. And, with everything else going on with the franchise, it's like, this is just one of a list of things. And obviously it's one of the biggest, but maybe the biggest is your franchise cornerstone, Damian Lillard, and how he was thrust into the search, the coaching search, and how I wouldn't say he was thrown under the bus, but he was put out there in a way that normally doesn't happen. His legacy was momentarily impacted, and I guess with the reports of how he feels and what we know about he feels, where, I guess I just wonder, where is he at with all this? Where is his happiness, and how does he feel about the coaching search and things moving forward? Because I think he's pretty unsettled right now, I guess.
Yeah, and it would be nice if, there would be a press conference with Lillard, or Lillard would have been there. McCollum and Covington were there, but they were not made available. It's so okay. When O'Shea and the team parted ways on June 4th, June 5th, he put out, and this was one of Lillard's first mistakes, was he put out Kidd and Billups. And when he put them out, either no one told him or he had no clue. He claims he had no clue that those two had baggage. I think if someone had said to him, hey, man, Jason Kidd was this, and this, he might have been like, okay, well, I'm not going to put that out there. But at the same time, if you're Dame, and he said this in his tweet, he was a little kid when those things came out. So I can conceive where he didn't know about it. And Kidd went on to win a championship. Damian Lillard watched Jason Kidd play NBA basketball and win a championship. He watched Billups play NBA basketball, win a championship. He watched Kidd coach the Nets and coach Milwaukee. He watched Billups get offered a job from Cleveland, and now he's coaching the Clippers, and he was on ESPN. So there's no reason. I totally believe there's no reason for Damian Lillard to think that those two wouldn't be able to coach in Portland. But once the controversy started, he knew, and Billups still remained a prime candidate throughout the entire process. So anyone out there who was angry about that was going to eventually steer that anger toward Lillard. The problem is that during that entire 2-week period with the interviews and then the second interviews and then the leaks, is that the Blazers at the end had decided that they believed Billups, that nothing happened. And they did that by Thursday, Friday, but then there wasn't a press conference till Tuesday. Now, O'Shea said, though, well, there was logistical issues because Billups is coaching with the Clippers. The Clippers played Monday night. They're playing tonight. So there was some window situations there. But Lillard was left dangling out there for like 3 days, with being associated with them maybe hiring an accused rapist, right? And that's just an awkward position to be in. But I suspect that at the time, Lillard believed Billups. So it was almost like Lillard should just never said anything and not responded to anything at all and waited for the process to play out, as opposed to defending himself and then going to Yahoo. And yes, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I would assume that he was one of the sources in the Yahoo story saying he's unhappy about the process. So it just went off the rails at that point. And I just was like, I cannot believe this is happening from his standpoint, from the team standpoint, from Billups' standpoint. It was just a mess.
Yeah, it was. It seems like Dame wanted to interject himself to kind of make it be known who he wanted to stress his importance, to kind of flex where he's at a little bit. Exactly. And I think it was the timing of it, the manner by which he did it. It just didn't go well. It was just poorly executed. And that's really on Dame's reps. Like you have to have people helping you out along the way. To guide you through these type of situations. And no question it could have been handled better. I have been told by multiple people, both still involved and both going out the door, that Damian did not know about either background of either player or accusations / guilty. Now, my response to that was, I didn't know about the stuff related to Chauncey either. So I get that. And I'm much older than Dame. So I wasn't 7 or 8 at the time, but I mean, the stuff on Kidd has been widely reported. I mean,
right.
And he pled guilty. So that's a whole different issue. And I do believe these sources. I do believe that Dame didn't know.
No, I believe he didn't know as of June 5th, but as of June 5th, he did know.
The problem was then it comes out and then he's linked to that because fans don't care. They assume that he's awful or what, fans, I should say a certain segment of fans are going to believe what they're going to believe. And so that plays out the way it plays out. But, I have been told, through the course of this, that people on the staff knew that Chauncey was Neil O'Shea's guy for a year, that he had already targeted him internally, maybe his own internally, and identified him as a guy that he wanted to replace Terry should that situation arise. Anybody who has been around Neil over the years knows how much or how highly he thinks of Chauncey. from his time, in the front office and with the Clippers. And so that wasn't a surprise, but to have this, we're going to have a 20-person committee and search and all that stuff. Like, you have to do all that, and maybe someone else arrives and you change your mind, but you can't leave your guy out there, your star hanging out there to dry. It was just mismanaged from many perspectives. And then again, there is this tendency in our society to go to the worst, or to just, you're guilty until proven innocent and all the other cliches you can throw out there.
Right.
But whatever the circumstances, the timing of it all and stuff, it didn't serve Dame well. It didn't serve the franchise well. The 3 days or more of silence just was awful. It allowed fans' worst feelings about the situation to fester and them to harden their stance. And my whole thing is, when we were talking, not you and I, but with bosses and so on, about how we approach this story, I was always like, I want to hear what they have to say. I want to hear what Chauncey has to say. I want to hear what the Blazers have to say. Because presumably, as we heard yesterday, they did do their background and they did have a stance on it all. And so I just think in the end, Dame was kind of caught in the crosshairs of the whole process, which was clumsy and just mismanaged. I think he's angry about how the search played out. I think he's angry about how he was injected into the conversation, some of which was his doing, but a lot of it was out of his control. He's angry that, his kind of reputation has been tarnished a little bit, and I think that will all wash over. He has universally been a good human being and a good person and a good leader and a good teammate, and go on and so on and so forth. So, one misstep doesn't tarnish everything. But he's also angry about the season, how it played out. And I think he wants to see Neil do something to make this roster better, to give him belief that next season is going to be different and going to be better. And so, from Neil's perspective, this is step one, hiring his guy as coach. Now he's got to do something with the roster. And but for right now, we're talking about the coach, and I guess there's a lot to be known about what Chauncey brings as a coach. We don't know. He's never been a head coach.
Before we move on to that, I do want to ask you this, though. Do you think the segment of the fan base that believes he participated in this rape, who believes he's a bad guy, are they ever going to come around? Do you think they can ever be convinced that maybe he didn't participate, maybe he is innocent, or do you think that they're just gone for good?
Oh, yes. Of course, fans will leave and come back and so on and so forth. There were fans who were tied to the Jail Blazers era who said they would never be fans again, and I'm sure they've come back, some of them. Now, some won't. Some will get out of it. You're in your routine, right? You love the team, you follow them every day. Something angers you, you move on, and then it leaves your routine. And then you go on to other things and you don't come back. Or if you truly believe, despite not knowing him or the people involved in the accusations and all that, if you truly believe he's guilty of what he's been charged of, then no, maybe you won't come back. But I don't know Chauncey. I don't know what happened. I do know that over the course of his 17-year playing career and his X amount of years afterwards as a commentator and a coach and front office and all that stuff, he has, especially as a player, he earns widespread acclaim for his leadership, for his personality, his being a good teammate. He literally won awards that Damian Lillard has won for being a good teammate. The award that Lillard just won. He's won stuff like that. Citizenship awards, so on and so forth. So until we learned of this allegation 20 whatever years ago and became so invested in him and that, and his character has never been under question otherwise. And so if he displays himself, I guess the point I'm getting at is if he presents himself in a manner that he has over the last 20 years, then I believe fans will come back, assuming the team has success. Because let's be real, basketball fans, that's what they care most about. How the team represents itself, the success of the team, wins and losses, and right now, playoff success. I will say, the whole, backtracking a little bit, the whole Neil trust us, it's proprietary, but you have to believe in me. And it's a big ask under these circumstances. But for 9 years, despite what you think about Neil, despite how you view how he carries himself, the caliber of person and caliber of player and the caliber of that player's character that he has brought into this franchise over the last decade has overwhelmingly been positive, has been good. I mean, I have been knee deep in the weeds of this team throughout his tenure until this last year. And universally, it's not 100%, but he's batting like 95% right now on good people in the organization, representing the organization well. And for many years in Portland, that was not the case. So he does deserve a little bit of, the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. I didn't think about that. I mean, it's not like he has a history of bringing in bad people.
Right.
He's known. It's not like he's like Chauncey's just some random person he picked out. Like you said, you've known people who say that Chauncey was his targeted next coach for over a year. He worked with him or coached or actually brought him into the Clippers when he was the GM there. So there is a history there. He does know him very well. So, I mean, that would indicate that Chauncey is a great dude. It doesn't necessarily mean he didn't have.
Involved.
Yeah. I mean, but still, we're never gonna know. People can pick. There's two different sides of this, and everyone's gonna take their side, and they're fighting each other. Neither side knows for sure, unless you were there. You don't know, and it's 24 years ago. And if he's been an exemplary citizen since then, the question is, do you just say, okay, we don't know, it was a long time ago, let's judge him on the last 20 years and move forward? I think a lot of people who are maybe fiery right now might shift to that, but I think it would have been an easier push for them to justify had he been allowed to talk more, elaborate on certain things like Jason's question. Someone texted me during the press conference. They're like, there's some people upset because neither one of them has said anything about addressing just the issue of violence against women, right? That, they're not saying, okay, we think he's innocent, but we want everyone to understand that that's a serious issue to us. It does mean something to us. Chauncey say that too. So that at least, okay, they're acknowledging that they're cognizant of the fact that there is a problem with violence and sexual assaults against women, and that many of them go either unreported or they're under investigated. They don't lead to convictions or prosecutions for a myriad of reasons. They didn't even get a chance to do that, which I think would have helped some people. So there's still some messiness with this. So interesting to see how it plays out. And you're going to have fun covering it because I'm going to take over the Frisbee golf beat. I saw a sweet Frisbee golf video, and I think I'm going to lobby for that after this. Okay, so let's push all that aside, because whether you wanted Chauncey or didn't want Chauncey, he's here. 5-year deal, 4 years guaranteed. O'Shea wanted him. Dame wanted him. They, whether mutual or not, there seriously was legitimately a nudge to get rid of Stotts, obviously, for different reasons. One of the things they talked about during the season, obviously defense. They wanted to make upgrades in defense. 2, accountability. 3, creating a sense of urgency, both on defense and just in discipline and attention to details, which guys like Covington and Powell talked about during the season, that they themselves embrace and experience at other places that weren't always here. So what do you think a hire like this does to address these issues, given that even though he hasn't really coached, the bulk of his career, the main heart of his career was as a point guard, which Dame is, on a championship team, which Dame wants to be on, playing for a defensive-minded coach in Larry Brown. And that team was built on defense with Rasheed and Prince and Ben Wallace, et cetera, et cetera. What do you think Chauncey brings to this team as a coach?
Well, first and foremost, I don't know.
Okay, next topic.
No. I'll carry on. But it's like there is a bit of irony in that you tout you want to bring in a certain mentality and accountability and personality and all that, and you bring in someone who has no experience. It's a very interesting move, but I think it speaks to how highly Neil thinks of Chauncey and how much he believes in him. And a 4-year contract speaks volumes to that, because Terry never had a 4-year contract.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's pretty that's a pretty emphatic statement that the franchise believes in him and they think he's going to take it to good places. I will say this: it seems like players seem to love him. You saw the response. I think Nicholas Batum came out yesterday on Twitter and congratulated Chauncey, and obviously he plays for the Clippers under Chauncey as his assistant there right now, and said that Rip City was getting a good leader and a good a person or a good coach and all that, and so it's clear that he connects with the players, and I think the points that you hit on, he's an NBA champion point guard, and he was always known as a gifted leader and a good locker room guy and a motivator. And those are traits that tend to carry on to whatever endeavor you do in life. So he'll bring that. Usually point guards, X's and O's, their strategy and all that, it usually is pretty high level. So we shall see. But massaging egos, managing playing time, setting a foundation for the franchise in terms of when to practice, when not to practice, when to shoot around, what to work on, what to focus on. Like, he's never done that. So there will be a learning curve. And I believe it is 1,000% imperative that he surrounds himself with an experienced staff behind him that features guys with head coaching experience. And this was brought up in the news conference yesterday. And I do believe he will do that. I believe he said he plans on, and I think that is important for him to do. You mean look at Steve Nash in Brooklyn, your championship pick. Even Steve Nash surrounded himself with experienced assistants with D'Antoni and others who have been through it. And so I think that'll be important for him. But it was interesting when he talked yesterday, when he talked about defense, he was like, you got to hold guys accountable and, focus on it. But when he talked about assistants, he was like, well, I was an offensive point guard. And so, it was a little contrary to what he's brought in here to do. But
right.
More than anything, there is an unknown with him, much as there was with Terry Stotts, although there was a lot of focus on him being an offensive genius at the time he was hired. But I think it is a big unknown for me personally.
I liked the little dig about Brooklyn. That was cute. But I said Brooklyn would win it if healthy.
Oh.
They were not healthy.
Milwaukee was looking pretty good until Giannis destroyed his leg last night.
Yeah, that might be pretty bad too, right? There's some reports that it might be ACL. Wouldn't that be amazing if the Hawks made it to the finals?
Good for Nate, and if so, talk about former Blazers head coaches.
Yeah, that's crazy. I think probably the most fascinating aspect to this for me is that I believe Lillard is really going to what's the word I'm looking for? I feel like Stotts raised Lillard, and now Lillard has become this big giant star that's bigger than the franchise, and that someone like Billups can maybe get to him a little bit more about some details of playing the point guard position, of being a leader. Hey, yes, Blazer fans, Lillard can improve. He's not a god. And especially on defense, and that Lillard will listen to what Billups has to say because of who he is and what he's accomplished as a player. Not saying he wouldn't listen to Terry, but I think once he's reached star status, there's a different level of respect for Billups as a former player. Stotts didn't play in the NBA, as a champion, as a point guard, so that maybe Billups can get Lillard to even take another step in his evolution, especially on defense. I think the rest of the players will listen to him. I think he'll hold people accountable. The thing about Larry Brown held people accountable, except maybe for Allen Iverson when it came to practice. But other than that, Larry Brown was known for holding people accountable. So I think there's going to be a fascinating dynamic working there. He's talked a lot about more ball movement in the offense, not ending up in situations where Dame or CJ must, rescue the team with some kind of miraculous step back three, which to me, whenever that happens, a lot of people are like, oh my God, Dame's amazing. And I'm like, you're not going to win many games relying on that as your bailout situation because the offense becomes stagnant. So I do think there's going to be some interesting aspects about him as a coach. Now, one thing Neil said too is that, yes, he doesn't have experience, but they're betting on the basically the upside and the untapped potential, I think he said, unrealized potential of what they believe Chauncey Billups brings as a coach. And let's face it too, man, the NBA has long been a league where you don't have to have experience as a coach to become a head coach. It's just that type of sport. We can go all the way back to when Bill Russell was playing and coaching, which I still would love to see today. Some people say we saw that with LeBron in Cleveland, but I would love to see a player coach and play today. But it's one of those sports. I mean, Kerr, Nash is coaching. They've had success. Phil Jackson was an assistant coach, never coached before, and then won 6 titles with the Bulls. I mean, you don't have to have a lot of coaching experience to be a coach in the NBA. I think playing point guard, as you said, is a huge bit of experience to be ready for that type of role. So it's going to be fascinating to see what happens the next couple of years. And back to Lillard real quick. I've maintained this about Lillard, and even after the report came out the other day and fans are freaking out, and I want to give fans across the NBA credit, though, for cracking me up and keeping me sane during all this nonsense, because every time something crazy would happen and people were like, Dame's going to leave, fans in every city were putting out Photoshop photos of Dame in their team's uniform and saying, come to Portland, which I found extremely amusing. But I would always respond to them with, Dame's not going anywhere, and he's not going anywhere right now. But they still have to contend. Like, if this year goes south and they come into next summer and they were a first-round exit and they weren't any better, then I think the clock really starts ticking on Dame's time in Portland. I don't think Chauncey saves that. I think Dame knows his career mortality is right in front of his face, and he wants a chance to win the title. So they're going to have to make some type of roster moves, which we can get to if you're ready. If you're ready to move along.
Before we do that, and I didn't know if we were going into that, or I will say, I wish that they hadn't cut off the press conference when they did, so that there could have been more basketball related questions, because I would like to know what Chauncey thinks and plans. There was a couple things, he did mention that he wants Nurkic to involve him more with the ball, which I thought was interesting, to take Dame and CJ off the ball more. And so that was an interesting note, because we do know that Nurkic is a gifted passer, and we do know that the Blazers need to take pressure off of Dame and CJ.
And Nurkic was lobbying for that after the Game 6 loss. He wanted to be able to do that.
And I think Terry, I don't know if it was a fault, but it was where things ended up. There was a lot of trust in Dame to go do the team or to go get things done. And not just bail out the team with a last-second shot, like has been discussed, but Dame had a lot of freedom to call plays and to run offenses based upon how he sees things. And I think that's smart in a lot of ways, because the players are on the court and they can see, especially a point guard, can see what doesn't work. It'll be interesting to see if Chauncey gives that long of a leash to Dame, or if he takes over, the majority of the play calling. It'll be interesting to see where that balance lies, because it's going to be, new for Chauncey, but this is going to be new for Dame too, who has, as you said, was raised with Terry, but also settled into a comfort zone with being able to have a lot of control. And so I don't know how that will unfold. You didn't get the chance to ask Chauncey about that sort of stuff. So we'll see. And that's what training camp's for and all that, but that'll be something worth keeping in mind too. And presumably, and this was something that I think you wanted to talk about, was a guy with Chauncey's status and cachet in the league, particularly with regard to players. Does that help the Blazers view league-wide as a free agent destination? Does having him as a coach and a leader, will that be more apt to lure a star either through trade or free agency? I don't know.
Thanks for bringing it. I forgot we had that in that section 3. Thanks for reminding me of that.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge factor here, and I do think he's going to add some cachet in that regard, because I do believe there's a lot of players around the league who either grew up watching him, maybe watching him win a title, even if they were super young. They know who he is. They know what kind of guy he is around the league and been purported to be. And I do think when you have a former NBA champion point guard as your head coach, I think that's going to be attractive to not everyone, but to some people. And it could help them in terms of either A, attracting a free agent, not that they have a lot of cap room, or B, if there's a star that could be traded, that star might, want to not only, if he's being traded, he's being traded. It's usually not within your control in that situation. But if you have only 1 or 2 years left on your contract, where you say, yeah, I'll come to Portland and I'll re-sign and I'll stay here with Lillard and try and win a championship with him, with Billups as our coach. So I can't imagine that that's not going to be sort of like a bonus to this entire thing. I would be shocked if it isn't. So it'll be fascinating to see how that plays out this offseason.
Yeah, and that kind of does shift us, I guess, a little bit to the roster and maybe to Dame's happiness or unhappiness or whatever. I mean, Nurk came out recently and said he was told he wouldn't be traded. I've seen reports that CJ has told people he's not going to be involved in trades, and I don't believe any of that. I haven't
seen the CJ one. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's probably a report about you not getting traded, Aaron. I mean, this is the world we're living in.
We know that's not true. I'm on the block every day.
But it's how can you, as Neil Olshey and coming off the season you just came off, really not make any moves? And I think whatever conversations Dame and Neil have had in recent days, weeks, whatever, surely Dame has gone to him to say, let's make some moves. You're talking about him having a 1-year clock on needing to see improvement. Presumably there's an edict to make this roster better and to give me a team that can help me chase a championship. So I don't believe that anybody besides Dame is not going to be available in a trade should the trade be made available to make the team better. So that sort of stuff is insane for me to hear. But I mean, as a fan, as Damian Lillard, don't you want to see something done to make this roster not just better around the edges, but better, like significantly better?
Look, here's the funny thing about this. After the Western Conference Final run, they believed they were going to have a chance to make a similar run the next year, and everything went downhill. You didn't have Nurkic, but they thought he was going to get him back, and then obviously COVID hit, et cetera.
They blew up the team they had.
Well, yeah, but they still thought with Hood, with Collins, and then with Nurkic eventually coming back that they would have a pretty good look. But yes, you're right. They did let a lot of people go, but they believed it. And then this year, they get Covington, they get Jones, and they believe they can contend. So they went into the last 2 seasons believing they could contend. So that means Lillard believed that they could contend. Clearly, they did not. We can blame injuries if we want, but they didn't. And now, if this report from Yahoo is true that he has reservations about them being able to build a championship team around him, well, that means he doesn't think the team they have now is a championship team, right? You wouldn't have reservations about them having a championship team if you felt you already had a championship team, correct? So that only serves to indicate that he's expecting moves to be made to make this team better. And so if you're going to do that, it's not going to be tiny, like they're not going to Robert Covington and Derrick Jones their way to a title. Like those are, you have to start at the top, and they have one all-star, they have another borderline star, and they have a center who knows what he is. He's complaining about his role after losing to Denver, and the guy couldn't stay out of foul trouble and missed most of half of the season and missed most of the prior season. I'm supposed to build the offense around you. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve a bigger role. I'm just saying that we don't know what Nurkic yet, what he is yet after still 3 years, really. So to me, they're never going to win a title or contend for a title with a 3-guard lineup. I'll just say it right now. It's never happened in my lifetime. I don't believe it's going to happen tomorrow. I just don't. Now, yeah, Neil made the comment, look what's happening in the NBA now. Well, yeah, what's happening in the NBA now is Atlanta has a chance to go to the finals, and Phoenix has a chance to go to the finals because LeBron, AD, Harden, Kyrie, et cetera, Kawhi, we're all injured. Some of the best players in the league were injured. That's opened the door for second-tier teams to get in. That doesn't mean it's going to happen next year. So, yes, they have to make a move. And I don't want to blow your head off because I know you hate hot takes and pontificating and all this kind of stuff. But I would go out and trade for Ben Simmons yesterday because I think you can see the picture pop up. I think that, to me, that's the kind of thing Portland would have to seize. A young star, maybe there's, the team's ready to move on and he's ready to move on, and you have a player that fits that team's need. That team needs a perimeter scorer who can get their own shot. And I believe wholeheartedly, that Ben Simmons in Portland would beat the current Portland team. And McCollum in Philly would beat the Philly team with Ben Simmons. Like, I honestly believe this is an absolute win-win situation where both teams are better because of the fit given what they already have. The Blazers have 4 guards. 6'2" to 6'3" that can score. Who needs 4 guards who can score who are under 6'3" or under? No one does. It's ridiculous. That's like having 4 leadoff hitters who all hit 260 and get a 350 on base percentage, but none of them can hit for power. It doesn't do you any good as a baseball team. It wouldn't do you any good in this situation, which is why they can't contend. You give them a 6'11" guy who's an elite defender, who can pass, who can post up, who's amazing in transition, who led the NBA in assists for threes. Yes, he has offensive issues, but you don't need his offense because you have Dame, you'd have Powell, and you have Simon's coming off the bench, and you have Nurkic. And you have Covington, who had a career high of 38% three-point shooting. So that's the type of deal to me that they could make that I think would get them in the conversation of being a serious contender.
Yeah, that's assuming Philly wants to trade him.
Of course.
That's assuming. I mean, I've heard over the years a lot of.
As soon as I started this, Joe Freeman got his fireman hat on, got into his fire truck, came to the scene of the hot take fire, and was ready to just go. So carry on.
Yeah, let's bring this back to reality. You have to assume that Philly wants to trade him, which I don't know. You've got to. I have heard through the years some concerning issues with related to character problems with
work ethic
him.
issues, but
yeah.
I think Dame,
not just work. Yeah, it's.
I think Dame
personality.
I think Dame fixes that. But go ahead.
Also,
he's the leader.
You don't. Do you want this? Does this guy want to be a point guard, or does he want to go play down low? Because if he wants to be a point guard, he's not going to want to join a team with perhaps the best point guard in franchise history.
But he
one
can
of the
do
best point guards
both
in the league.
because I've heard that Lillard wants to play more off the ball if possible to stop. I mean, I think Lillard's tired of coming up the court. And there's 2 guys in my face who, by the way, are 6'5" and 6'6". Right? Imagine if he can give it to a 6'11" guy who can play point at an elite level, and now he can run and sort of play the Allen Iverson role, the 6'2" guard, getting his shot because some elite level point guard can get him the rock. I mean, I think Dame would give up the ball enough to let Ben Simmons play part of the game as a point, the other part as a forward.
Okay, and then the third thing is the biggest
I'm all over this.
Among that is. You're making the assumption that Norman Powell wants to come back to Portland and that the Blazers are going to re-sign Norman Powell. And that's a big if.
That is an if.
And that is an important if, I think.
It is an if.
Because you're going to need that in your scenario.
But they have his bird rights.
Well, sure, if they want to throw money at him and he doesn't, I don't know what he wants. Does he want to be the man somewhere? Does he want to make the most money? Does he want to go to form, some superstar team and be not, third or fourth guy? I don't know what he wants. So
you're right.
Nobody, he knows maybe, but we don't know. So again, a lot of ifs around this dream scenario of yours. But I do, the larger point though, without talking about specific names, is the star caliber of player that you're talking about, which is what I think Dame does want to add to the team. Yes. And I think obviously fans are desperate for that. I have over the years staunchly said you can win with Dame and CJ if you surround them with the right pieces. And I think we've seen that in the past with a Western Conference run and other successful runs, but we've also seen that it takes the right set of circumstances to make it happen. And so once you get that guy, you also I don't want to see a second unit with Cantor and Melo and Simon, like that trio that doesn't work. Okay. We've seen that. I think Melo's probably time here is done. Who knows where Cantor's going, but we need a better bench unit that complements the starters, and you can mix and match guys more. Right. Don't go spend $9.5 million on your guy, Derek Jones Jr., who's not even going to be in the lineup and the rotation at the end of the year. I mean, that was a big swing and a miss over the summer. So again, I want to see better roster construction with this team. And this is me using hindsight as my guide too, because I really like the roster going into the season. Obviously, stupidly so.
No, I don't think
I do love
a good roster. No, it's just not a championship roster.
I love Covington. I think there is a lot of pieces to build. I still think the roster is really good. Yeah. But you need to add another star, and you need to fill out that bench with guys that can be better on both ends and be better cohesively than we've seen.
Yeah, and I might have said this during our last podcast, video cast, whatever we're calling this. for all the negativity out there towards O'Shea about the roster, and it's so funny when people are like, "Oh, this roster sucks. This is garbage," and then you suggest a trade. We're not trading them for them. Our guys are great. You can't have it both ways, right? But this team, despite losing Nurkic and McCollum for 60 games, finished tied with the 8th best record in basketball.
Mm-hmm.
Not 18th, not 28th. They were 8th. Now, I don't think they're a title contender 8, but they were 8th. Now, you could say, well, but would they have been 8th if the Lakers hadn't had injuries? Probably not. Would they have been 8th if other people didn't have injuries? Probably not. But the point is, they had injuries too, and they finished 8th. So there is reason for hope.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like the roster was talented, and it was that good, having played large parts, if not most of the season, without Nurkic and CJ. And when CJ came back, he wasn't 100% anyway.
No,
and neither was
Nurkic. And then they got Powell late March.
So there's a lot of, excuses or whatever you want to call them built in for how things unfolded too. I guess the larger point is that the roster is good and there is a lot of talented, but they do need to there needs to be some 100%. Stuff done to take it to that next level.
Well, Neil even said at the press conference following Stotts' departure that he needed to focus on how to make the bench, the second unit, better defensively. Like offensively, it was pretty good with Cantor and Melo and Simons, but defensively, it's just like you're putting 3 negative defenders out there together, although Simons came along a little bit defensively. But then and that sort of made it crazy that they weren't playing Jones because he played defense. That was his thing, right? So why wouldn't you mix him? But anyway, whatever. That season's over. I believe they're definitely going to be like, if they did nothing and they were healthy and they just got into the teens on defense, then you're looking at a 4 or 5 seed in the West. I mean, potential to be that. That doesn't mean they're going to win the title, but to me, that's the floor. Like 4 or 5 seed, if you're healthy, is the floor right now for this team, in my estimation, if they fix the defense, which Billups is being brought in to do, and with a whole season with Powell and Nurkic and CJ, et cetera, et cetera. But they have to add a legitimate star, I think, to actually get over the hump and win the title, assuming that the rest of the league doesn't have massive injuries like they do right now. So,
and bring Powell back. Big question mark.
Yeah, I mean, I'm counting him on the roster until he's gone. He's coming back.
One guy that we haven't talked a lot about at all is Zach Collins, who he was a huge loss for them this year. Quietly, a huge loss for that defense that obviously was so poor. And
if he would have played last year, they would have been in the teens on defense. But anyway,
and you feel bad for him having to. I'm sure everybody knows by now he had to have another surgery on his ankle yesterday. Who knows how long his rehab's back? He's going to be a free agent. It sucks for a dude like him. He's a really good guy. Works his tail off. And it's a big setback. But I texted him a little bit yesterday, and
did you?
He's in pretty good spirits. I mean, he's motivated. He said he's going to come back and work stronger to get back. So it'll be interesting to see how that comes, and does he factor into the Blazers' plans? Do they try to bring him back on a minimum deal? Does he move on? So, but just bring up that's another,
No, yeah, that's, I know we're supposed to be, objective, impartial journalists, but things like that, it's like, it's so unfortunate. It's so unfair. You know what I mean? He basically lost 2 seasons already. Now, this originally was supposed to be a 4 to 5 month injury, which is why he was supposed to come back in January after the surgery at the bubble in September. Following injuring it, I think against Memphis in the playing game. So he was supposed to be back in January. So we had revision surgery. So I would assume that was another 4 or 5 months. And then if he's having another one, that's another 4 or 5 months. So if all goes well, I guess he could be back to action in November, December. So let's hope he does. Do you think the Blazers in any way give him the qualifying offer at 7.4, knowing that he won't? It makes him a restricted free agent. He won't receive any big offers from anywhere else. You bring him in and you just hope for 1 more year?
No. Not a team with the financial constraints that the Blazers have. I mean, I've been wrong before, but it doesn't make sense. He would jump at the chance to get $7.5 million for free. Well, not, I don't, that doesn't mean that they won't bring him back. I think that they would, as much as, or as
let him become a free agent,
then bring him back on like a minimum deal, because they're as likely as any other team to know who he is and to trust him and to want to. I mean, they've come this far, but it doesn't make sense from a team standpoint to give a guy $7.5 million when perhaps you can bring him back on a minimum deal. So yeah, I would be very surprised if they qualified him at this point.
For listening to the Blazer Focus podcast. I'm Aaron Fentress. We will see you again next time.